Welcome to Trees for Tomorrow's virtual hike. Today we bring to you a special travel edition. My name is Kim Beller, the education manager here at Trees for Tomorrow, and I recently had a chance to travel to coastal South Carolina to visit my sister and brother-in-law and decided it would be cool to share a new environment with you all and to also remind you that when you're traveling, just how interesting it is that landscapes and different habitats and ecosystems to explore. The place that I went is a place called Lewis Ocean Bay, which you might hear me abbreviate it as LOB because it's kind of a long name. Lewis Ocean Bay is just over 10,000 acre parcel of land just west of the heavily developed Myrtle Beach. So as you're looking at this picture, LOB is in the center, and then Myrtle Beach is going to be on your lower right-hand side. You know, most people come to Myrtle Beach for the beach and all the fun attractions, but just west of there is a really cool place, especially if you're more into nature and quieter a day away from the people. So it's a really interesting place to explore. So LOB is home to 23 landscape features called Carolina Bays. So they're shallow oval depressions that are often wet, found along the coastal plain from New Jersey to Florida. Every single bay has its long axis oriented along a northwest to southeast angle. So in this picture, north is straight up, just like you would find on a map. And the management philosophy of Lewis Ocean Bay is that it's managed so the land will be as historically as it was. So the first step is fire prescription for LOB. When I visited, LOB had been burned about 3 weeks before, so you can look at the horizon line and kind of see just how tall that fire got. It wasn't a super intense crown fire, even though some needles up at top are brown. And you can also see some of that regrowth already happening, which really surprised me. This landscape has been adapted to fire, and the plants are able to put some shoots up after that fire. Prescribed fire is one of the principal ways that historic conditions are maintained out at LOB. Their fire interval is every 2 to 3 years. Usually a ground fire, so not super intense, comes through, burns the understory, keeps that canopy pretty clear so that herbaceous plants can grow on the floor. However, the last time it was burned prior to this year was over 5 years ago. But the area to the right of the fire break wasn't burned just due to the way the prescription was written, but the area to the left was. So our next step is showing you kind of the predominant tree species. They're loblolly pine or longleaf pine. And they're pretty hard to tell apart because their canopy is really up high. So this kind of reminded me of our red pines that we have here. So one of the really important species they try to recreate historical conditions to help promote is longleaf pine. And longleaf pines grow really slow, so they're often outcompeted for sun by faster species, which is why fire is so important to them. The longleaf pine in this picture, modeled by my lovely sister, is actually probably closer to 10 or 15 years old, or maybe older. So one reason why longleaf pine preservation is so important is because they help make habitat for the federally endangered red-cockaded woodpecker, who only nests in live pines. We were able to see a group of trees, and this tree right in the foreground is marked with a white band, which means that they have found a red-cockaded hole there. How can you spot a tree that a red-cockaded is nesting in? So look for a hole pretty close to the top, like just under the canopy. Pointing to the hole with this red arrow is this trail of sap, and you can see it a little bit on this tree. Is the birds are going to drill holes to keep that sap flowing out of the tree as a method of defense against predators. The next step we took was to visit one of the traps that my brother-in-law set out. He is a technician with SCDNR, and he does a lot of herp work, which is short for herpetology, and that means reptiles and amphibians. So he does a lot of work with snakes, and this is a snake trap. So this acts like a drift fence. So they'll hit the fence, and they'll go either way, and at either end, they funnel the snakes into a bucket. Hanging from the top, a camera trap is mounted. That camera will take a picture once they detect the movement of the snake, and then the snake can definitely be able to slither back up out of the bucket, and they're checked pretty regularly in case the snake wants to stay there. And then the last stop, and probably my favorite, was the opportunity to see some different plants. So some were a bit hard to see, like this eastern prickly pear, because of the recent burns. So you can tell it's a little burned out, but some were already regrowing. some plants get to have their nitrogen through eating bugs and other things. We actually have these plants up here in Wisconsin. These are short pitcher plant. The leaves were burned, so everything that's charred is kind of the leaf and it forms an open cup. But you can tell they're already resprouting flowers, so the tiny stalks with the ball on the end, that you can think of that almost like a flower bud. Another type of carnivorous plant, and actually a second species of pitcher plant that can be found at LOB, is this yellow trumpet pitcher plant, which is a couple feet tall, but it was a little too early in the year, so I had to draw from a stock picture. So sundew is also present, and we have sundew in our bogs and lowlands up here. You can tell by my fingers on the left side of the photo, like how small it is. At LOB, I was excited and lucky to find some. How sundew traps its flies is that if you look really close, it has these little tiny stalks that appear to be wet, and each one of those drops is really sticky, so the little gnats and bugs get stuck there and then they're slowly digested. And then finally, probably the most well-known carnivorous plant to most people is the Venus flytrap, and this is one of my must-see items at LOB. Here in the United States, they have an extremely limited range. So basically it's just southern coastal North Carolina and northern to mid South Carolina. Luckily for us, they were regrowing in a burned area, so they stood out a little bit. If you do ever find yourself at LOB or anywhere where there is wild Venus flytraps, just know that there are really hefty penalties for picking them, which include prison time and thousands of dollars in fines. The right thing to do to just leave the wild plants be, but it's also in your best interest to avoid paying fines and going to jail. And that concludes our virtual hike. Thanks so much. Happy travel!